Wait, are you are you gonna count me in? Whatever. I'm just gonna go for it. Welcome to the Queen's Lead podcast. I'm your host, Amy Singleton, and as a child of the 80s, I'd love to say queens rule, but they don't. Queens lead. Being a queen means you are worthy to be a leader of people. The guests on our show do exactly that. They are leading the way in their businesses, families, and communities. And they're taking their rightful place in the spotlight, leading and inspiring the developing queens in all of us. Welcome to the Queen's Lead podcast.
Now here's your host, Amy Singleton, the queen of realness, leading conversations about business, life, and the real shit you want to know.
Welcome everybody back to another episode of the Queen's Lead podcast. I'm your host, Amy Singleton, and this is Jolie Goodson. We are so blessed to be joined by her today, the badass in branding. Welcome, Jolie.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here. I'm looking at your shirt. You're in Oklahoma City?
Oklahoma City, that's right.
Oh, wow. Far away from where I am.
Far away from Canada, that's for sure. Where are you at in Canada?
Calgary. So Western Canada, Rockies.
Rockies.
Yeah.
Pretty cold there right now, I imagine.
It is. It is. I mean, I heard you guys are cold where you are, but you have no idea what cold is until you.
Right. No, we have no idea. Our people act like they do. And it's funny because this episode is launching in June, which is probably blazing hot, like three-digit temperatures.
Yeah. It's still
we
cold
do definitely. We get all seasons here for sure.
Very
so
cool.
Tell everybody a little bit about you and who you are and kind of what you do right now.
Yeah, well, lots of things, right? Wearing lots of hats like you, I'm sure. So, like you said, my name is Jolie Goodson, known as the Branding Badass. And I'm, in a nutshell, I'm really helping businesses build their brands and build brand equity. And I do that different ways. I work for a company called Genumark. I've been with them over actually just celebrate 22 years, if you can believe it.
Congratulations.
Started when I was 10.
Right, exactly.
And basically what I do is we help businesses build their brand awareness with merch. So all kinds of really cool merch. And then in 2020,
which we're both wearing right now, right?
Wearing,
like
exactly.
Everyone, we all love merch.
And I'm looking behind you and, it's funny. So
love merch.
Big business, great way to build your brand and create awareness for your business. And then in 2021, January 2021, I launched my podcast called Branding Matters. And it was a passion project. I started it when we were in lockdown. And because my background is branding and marketing, I started seeing lots of people all over social saying, buy my product, buy my service. People were getting laid off from their jobs. Forced entrepreneurship was a real thing. So there's a lot of new businesses starting. And I got to see, and people weren't really, from my perspective, understanding what it means to really build a brand before you build a business, right? Figuring out what your brand is. What do you want your brand voice to be? What's your mission? What's your purpose? What's your brand identity? They were just like, okay, I'm starting a business and go. And then you'd see everybody on social, buy my product, buy my service. Yeah. And so I thought, okay, well, COVID is an international problem. The pandemic was an international issue. Forced entrepreneurship was an international situation, people all over the world. And so I thought, it was actually my boyfriend's idea, full disclosure. He just said to me, because he listens to soccer podcasts and we talked about it and he said, well, why don't you start a podcast? Just half joking. But I'm somebody, I don't just do things half-assed. And so I'd rather try something instead of saying shoulda, woulda, coulda. So I was like, why don't I start a podcast? And so I started it and came up with the name Branding Matters. He helped me with that too, because it's the double entendre of all things to do with branding, from, your logo to your brand, all your brand identity, your colors, to your brand voice, to your website, all your marketing, social media, to Branding Matters. If you have a business, whether you're a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, a small business owner, CEO, you really need to make sure that you have a strong brand and a brand that people care about, because that's how they're going to, decide who they want to do business with, is your brand.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I'm so glad that this conversation is being opened more, just especially within these last few years, because your brand is not, like you said, it's not just your logo. I have so many people come to me. I have this new business and I need a logo. Okay, well, let's talk about that. We're going to be developing your brand. What's your timeline? We take some time to develop this with people, right? And reiterate, I need it yesterday. I just got to get it up and going.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I know for sure that we're not going to be a good fit for someone that, I have people I refer them to like, here, go get you a stock logo over here and you can just take it and go on if that's what you feel your brand is. But that's absolutely not what a brand is.
Exactly. And the thing too, Amy, is that I know what I know, but I know what I don't know, right? Yes, I've been in the industry before I was in the merch industry, I was a copywriter. I worked in the advertising side. So that's
Mhm.
my background, but I also know what I don't know. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm going to bring on leaders from all over the world, from all different industries, who are going to share their story and really valuable branding tips to help people, my listeners, build their brands. And because that's the
Yeah,
thing, it's educate. I call it, education through entertainment, right? I mean, I
that's
like to
right.
infuse humor and have fun and not too serious. But at the end of the day, I want my listeners to walk away learning something that they can implement into their business to help them build a brand.
Absolutely. And,
Yeah.
and mine is no different, right? I mean, I'm telling the stories. We want to tell your story of how all of this came about. So will you take us back all the way to little girl Jolie? What were your dreams and aspirations back then?
Oh
And
my
how
God.
did that
That's a
iterate
long way,
itself?
by the way.
I know
I'm pretty
it's not
old.
that long. You said 23, you're 32, right?
Yeah, it's a
That's
long
right.
ways away. Well, honestly, I mean, I probably like a lot of kids, I really didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I grew up in a household. My mom's was an artist. My dad was a businessman, and photography was his passion. So very artsy family. Theater. I did theater growing up. I now have three siblings, and we're all in the marketing and branding business to some degree.
Yeah.
And so by osmosis, it was always around me, but I didn't really know what I want to do. And so after, I graduated university, and then I still didn't know what I want to do, and took off and traveled the world for 2 years. And, I'm so glad I did that. And then came back really and was like, can I swear on this podcast?
Oh, yes,
I was like,
please, by
holy
all
shit,
means.
now what do I do? And so literally my brother, he had been doing quite well in the marketing and advertising world by then. And he said, you should get into advertising. You're so creative and you've just traveled the world and your experience is going to help you. And so I put
Yeah.
together a book of specs, just myself, and walked around, knocked on doors, and got hired in advertising. And I did that for a while, and then realized, like, okay, I don't really like this. I like the creative side of it, but I didn't like
Yeah.
being at the desk and writing. And so then I switched careers and got into this business. And before I was with the company I'm now, I was with another company for 2 years. So probably 25 years doing what I'm doing now. Love it.
Wow.
So
That's
yeah.
incredible. I love it.
Yeah. Thank you.
So tell us a story about branding and someone that you've helped um that's really done it the right way.
Well, through my podcast or through my business or through both or
Either
whatever.
one. Just your prime example that you love to
Yeah.
tell. I'm sure
Well,
there's
I would
that favorite person.
Well, there's one and I'll talk about my podcast only because that seems to be more branding specific. Whereas, my merch industry is really about creating awareness with different programs and everything. And we can talk about that. But this is something that really brings it all home nicely. Is one of my very first guests when I first started. His name was Jeremy Miller, and he wrote a book called Sticky Branding. And he told his story. And basically, he talked about how his parents had a recruitment company, and I don't even remember the name, and it was failing miserably. And so he took it on, and they said, okay, we want you to come on and help us. And it was struggling. And he said, you don't have a sales problem, you have a branding problem. And so he rebranded the company, not just the name, but the way they went about everything, their whole vision and brand voice, and changed everything, completely revised the brand from the name to the brand identity, everything. And they made a killing. And then he ended up
Wow.
selling the business a few years later and, cashed out. And I love that story because, like he said, we didn't have a sales problem. I think so many companies today are focused on their sales, sales, sales. And guys, you got to up your sales. And really, if you look at like, what is your brand? I think if you can spend more time developing that and making it really strong, when you look at some of the most successful brands in the world, whether it's Nike or Apple, I mean, you build trust and you build
Mhm.
that people choose you first, become in your category. They talk about the category leader. You don't say, my kids, anyway, I have two teenagers. They don't say, I want a cell phone or I want a computer. They say, I want an iPhone and I want a, MacBook Air. Like
Mhm.
that's the ultimate story of why branding matters.
Yeah. That's absolutely right. But
So I don't know
what
if that was
about,
the answer. Sorry, I don't know
no,
if that
that
was
does. It's so good.
my story, but yeah.
Right. No, and I'd be interested to know what was the difference between the old and the new brand. But I mean, actually answer that now. What was the major differences? What are the things that they had to change about their brand to have that, to finally find that success that they were missing out on with the old brand?
Well, I would say I don't think a lot of companies are congruent in what they want to be and what they actually are. So I can't remember the name of the old company that it was, but it was some long, boring name that sounded like a bank. And then he changed it around and he made it really, because the audience that they were wanted to appeal to, that's the thing, is you have to know your audience and you have to speak to them in their language, right? So niche down, figure
Hmm.
out who it is you want to serve, and then talk to them in their language. And so he ended up changing the name to a really funky name, and all the brand identity back that up. It was current, it was new, it wasn't old and stodgy. And so
Yeah.
it's things like that. You talk about your voice, how you represent yourself on social media, how you look, everything, your merch. That's so important, right? If you're a company that's trying to be cool and funky and current, you're not going to buy boring, stale, run of the mill merch, right? You want everything that you do to encompass what your brand stands for, and be your brand voice and tell your story in every single way.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
That's absolutely right. And like you said, we don't say we're going to go do an internet search. We say we're going to Google it. We don't want a cell
right?
phone. We want an iPhone. But what about the small business? The people that aren't ever going to be Nike and maybe don't even want to be. Like what's different for them, and how did they proceed to get in that, like in that household name vein
Yeah,
when they're really not where those big companies are?
that's a great question, because think about Amazon, right? He started in his garage. Like a lot of
Yeah.
these big companies that you see, I don't know if people know this. Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, they were teenagers in their parents' garage. They were
Yeah.
university dropouts doing this. So it's not a matter of being big or small. I think it's, when you have a vision, and so again, my podcast, my target, or the people that I try to serve, are small business owners and our entrepreneurs and our solopreneurs. For the most part, I'm getting more now CEOs and C-suites that are now subscribers, but that was my intention, is to help these young people and give them free access to these leaders, because they don't have the money. You don't need a lot of money. I mean,
Mhm.
I do these presentations all the time about branding, and I say to people, it's about differentiating yourself. Real estate agents, perfect example. I did a presentation to a bunch of real estate agents. There's millions of real estate agents out there,
Oh,
millions,
so
right?
many.
And
So
so,
many.
but and they're very similar to me in the sense that, I work for a big company, but I'm 100% commission. It's like I call it an entrepreneur, right? Like we have our own business because we have our own clients, but we have this backing of this big company. So
Mhm.
a real estate agent has a brokerage firm that they work for, but really, they eat what they kill, and it's their small business. And so I tell them, like, what makes you different than the guys sitting beside you on the right and the woman sitting beside you on the left? Like, why am I
That's
going to
right.
choose you? And so
Mhm.
that's where you have to figure out what differentiates you from your competition,
Yeah.
and just to elaborate on that, when I talk about that, how do you differentiate yourself? Well, the first thing you need to do is figure out, what is your competition doing? I say, how do you know differentiate yourself if you don't know what they're doing? So
Yeah.
stock them, find out
That's
who your
right.
3 biggest competitors are in your town if
Yes.
you're a real estate agent. Find out what they're doing on social media. What are they saying? But most importantly, what problems are they solving? And then you
Mhm.
find the problem they're not solving that you're
That's right.
solving. And then lean into that. And that's what you can use to differentiate yourself. And then use that as your, base for starting to promote your brand and say, this is what I do. These are the problems. I mean, I'm not being literal. You don't say this is a problem myself, but you do it in a
Sure.
creative way. And
Absolutely.
so you can be an entrepreneur and you can be a small business owner. You don't need a lot of money to build a strong brand. You want
Yeah.
ultimately people to say, you know, um, don't get me, instead of saying someone like, get me a real estate agent. You want someone to say, get me Bob, because I heard he is like the go-to guy for
Yes.
real estate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, so many people, especially, I mean, I see it in real estate agents all the time, but so many people fall into the trap of, especially when they're new in business, they want and they were willing to do business with anybody, everybody, doesn't matter. Like anybody willing to pay me, I'll do any kind of job for whatever you will pay me. And so often that just bites you in the rear because you're really not developing a brand that's attracting the people you want to work with. And whenever you do begin to do that, your life and your business is so much better because
Yeah.
you have aligned values with what you're attracting, right?
Yeah. And that's big. You talked about aligning your values. That is so big right now. We want to do business with people that align with our values, right? And so we're living in a very transparent world. First thing you do when you meet someone is you Google them and find out what they're all about and see what they're saying. And if they don't align with your values, then you're not going to want to work with them. And the same thing with me. And, I can be very vocal, let's say on social, and I might say some things and that people may not agree with. And if they don't agree with me or they, are against what I have to say, then they don't want to do business with me. I don't want to do business with them either. Right. You know
That's
what I mean?
right.
So yes, I agree totally what you said. You have to niche down and
Yes.
find people that you share values with for sure.
100%. I hope
Yeah.
I repel the people I don't want to do business with. Like repel them hard. I have been there before. We don't want to attract those people.
Yeah.
What do you say about people um who who don't want to mix their personal with their business on social media?
Yeah. That's a great
Mhm.
question too. I
Such a
mean,
common question.
yeah, I've had that question too. I've talked to people about that. And I think it's a balance. I'm also a firm believer, and again, this is just me, but I'm also a firm believer in TMI, right? Like I think it's good to share who you are, what your values are, what's happening in your life, just so again, it lets people behind the curtain to know a little bit about
Mhm.
you to decide. But I also don't necessarily think you need to share everything. And my boyfriend broke up with me yesterday, or my mom and I got in a fight, or
Right.
because I think it's like there's a fine line between TMI and being transparent. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Some people may not agree, but that's how I feel. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I agree with you. I'm known for being very transparent. But you know, there's a crossover point, like you said, like if we think of our lives like a house, and there's all these different rooms, like not everyone necessarily gets into the basement of our house.
The
And
dungeon.
also
No, just kidding.
the dungeon, and I know you also do some like do public speaking as I do. And I have found the more and more that happens, the deeper I go into the details of a story, particularly a story of overcoming or a tragedy or trauma or something that something big that I've overcome in my life, when we get it too much into the details, it really detracts from the story and what we're trying to tell, and it detracts from that actionable piece that's actually helpful for someone, and it can really hijack their brains into a circle of feeling sorry for us or wondering what happened next or wanting more juicy, details about that thing. And so I really feel like oversharing detracts from our message versus really making it more impactful.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, why do you think people share? Now I feel like I'm taking over your podcast, but I'm not.
No, do it. I
I'm
love
getting to
it.
this point of view. I mean, why do you think sharing your story, or especially your story of adversity, why do you think that's important? Like, what's your opinion?
Oh, yeah. Well, for me, it's, I have a tremendous responsibility. I feel like almost my only responsibility is to be the person to stand up and say that I was an addict and now I'm not, that I was depressed and now I'm not, that I was suicidal and now I'm not, and that better life is possible for other people.
So, to be an inspiration for others.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. To give them the permission that they need to know that they're not alone. Because
Yeah.
in so many of the things throughout my life, I felt so alone because there wasn't anyone else out there standing up saying, me too. I've been there. I see you. I feel what you felt. It's huge.
Yeah. And I mean, I appreciate you saying that. And I think what is important there is not only that you're an inspiration, but that you're building connections. And,
Yeah.
branding is about building connections. So if you're talking from a personal branding point of view, right?
Yeah.
People, when you tell your story and you share it, and there's people in the audience are like, I can relate to that because that's happened to me. Now you start to build a connection with them. And so now
Yeah.
they're going to start to want to try, you're building trust with them and you're building that relation with them. And so that's why I think it's so important to share your story, especially a story of overcoming things. If I may share my badass story with you,
Please share your badass
because I
story.
always get asked about badass, and there's a reason why I call myself the branding badass, is because, to me, I define someone who is a badass as someone who comes up against horrible adversity and has been knocked down 10 times, but gets up 11 and,
Hmm.
does it all on their own, doesn't feel entitled to anything, doesn't have anybody out there helping them, but they do it themselves. I mean, of course, we have support of, friends and family, but I'm talking about like doing it yourself and not putting a hand out. Your success is
Hmm.
based on your hard work and not something that anyone has given you because you feel entitled, right? So I had a really tough year. Now, everybody's adversity is different, right? We all have
That's right.
different stories. My story,
Hmm.
2015, I was married for 16 years. Literally, my husband and I split. I became a single mom, two young kids, zero financial support. And at the same time, I work 100% commission, as I told you. Basically, lost $1 million client overnight. So, was making
Wow.
zero income, supporting my ex husband, my two kids, no money, no income. And I was low and then low, right? And it was
Yeah.
really friggin' tough. And I struggled and my
Hmm.
self-esteem took a nosedive. I felt like the biggest loser, like I can't believe I'm here. And I was, old. I was older. I wasn't in my 30s, but let's put it that way. And it was tough for me. And it took me a long time to dig myself. And then as I just start to see the light, and I tell this when I do my presentation, I see the light finally to good 5 years or more, COVID hit. And I was
Hmm.
knocked off my feet again and had to reinvent myself. And so that's when I came up with my podcast and called myself the branding badass. Just to end that, I mean, we talk about branding just by me calling myself the branding badass and changing my title on social. It started getting the ball rolling. People started reaching out to me, what's branding badass? What's badass? I like your t-shirt. I want your t-shirt, and anyway, and then the rest is history, as they say. But so I share my story, same thing, because I think there's a reason to, because I want
Hmm.
other women, to know, you're a badass and you can do this, right? So sorry,
That's
that's a
right.
long-winded answer, but
No, that's such a great story because, like you said, everybody has that story of overcoming. And, that's exactly what this podcast is about. There are women listening to this going, I am stuck in a 9 to 5, or I just lost my 9 to 5. And, like that forced entrepreneurship that we were talking about, you know, people are worried and lost and wondering and need to know that someone else has done that thing.
yeah.
They just need to know that.
Yeah, you're right. So you don't feel alone. And I love that I inspire people but I'm not, that's why I put badass on my t-shirt and not branding matters. I have my branding matters on the back because I knew that everybody, you're a badass. Like I interview badasses all the time. And so who doesn't want to sort of share that? And, you know, back to the whole brand and merch thing, that's a great example of when you're doing merch, instead of putting your logo on something, if you have a message that will connect you with the people you're trying to serve, that merch is
Mm.
going to be way more powerful. I get asked all the time where I get it, and people buy it on my website. And, so I'm all about messaging on merch as well, like thinking of creative different ways to get your message out there. Right.
Mhm.
So.
Talk to us a little bit about that messaging. I'm curious to know um, your take on brand messaging.
Yeah. So are you talking about with merch
Uh,
specifically or whatever?
sure, yeah, just
Yeah.
as a general business and for merch, sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're not mutually exclusive, right? I mean, you're telling your
Right.
brand story and you're doing it in different ways. You're doing it with your
Yeah.
messaging on social media. You're doing it with your posting. You're doing it on your podcast. You're doing it on your website. And merch is just another way to market that. The reason that it's, in my opinion, there's a lot of ROI on that is because it sticks around, right? I mean, I walk around, like I said, I bought a few of these t-shirts just to promote my podcast. And I purposely was very strategic in putting badass and not, like I said, I have branding matters on the back because I thought,
Hmm.
well, who's going to wear a t-shirt that says branding matters? Who cares? But
Yeah.
if, everybody thinks they're a badass. So, and it
Hmm.
worked because every time I went anywhere, I would get people ask me, where'd you get your t-shirt? And, I was just in Vegas at a conference and a woman comes up to me at Starbucks and she's like, I got to get your t-shirt. She's like, I have badass tattooed on my arm and I want that t-shirt, so and
Yeah.
then you're building connections and you're
You've
starting,
created a community.
yeah, and you're creating
There's an entire
conversation
community.
and engagement,
Right.
which is what brand you're supposed, that's what it's all about, is building community, creating engagement. And so
Yeah.
merch is a great way to do that if it's done right.
That's
If
right.
you just, I mean, sometimes it's okay to put a logo on something, but I think it's way more powerful. And I work with my clients and I talk about like, what are your values? A lot of corporate culture, a lot of companies have corporate values now. And I'm like, let's put
Hmm.
your values on there and let's talk about, what you stand for. And it's just creating excitement for whether it's onboarding gifts for new employees so they feel part of this community. Yeah, it's just different ways like that that you can be really creative. And I love that. I love working with my clients and coming up with fun ideas like that.
That's fun. One
Yeah.
interesting thing we do for our clients is instead of sending them something with our height logo on it when we onboard new clients, we send something to them with their logo on it
Yes.
because they're so proud of their brand, right? Like
Yeah.
and then they want to rep themselves. So just kind of an
Yeah, that's a
interesting
great
take on that.
idea. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you could take it even one step further is personalization is huge too, right? A
Hmm.
lot of times when I'll do a gift, we'll just put their name on it because I don't know about you, but there's not a lot of Jolies out there. And so when I
Yeah.
get something with my name on it, I love it because I never see it
Yes.
anywhere, right? So if I get a
Yes.
notebook or something and it has my name on it, I love it. And so people, again,
Yes.
it's just that little touch that makes it a little bit more personalized and building that
That's right.
connection. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And I just feel so like there's so much alignment here because the community and connection has been a theme these last, maybe 6 months or so. I feel a synergy with people needing connection and community with people. I think we're finally like on the other side of the pandemic and people are getting back out again. And they're like, man, we're desperate for human connection and to be seen and heard and feel a part of something.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people want to be a part of a community. Absolutely.
I think of Jeep. Jeep has created this huge community. I don't know if it's this way in Canada, but here in the United States, there is a huge Jeep community of people who drive like the regular boxy Jeeps, and they all have these little ducks. Do they have ducks? They
I
put
don't
these little ducks
know.
in their like in their dash. And
Yeah.
it's just like it's a thing that the community of Jeepers has started. I mean, and these ducks do not have Jeep, logo on them or anything,
Yeah.
but it's just it's like it's become part of their brand almost.
Oh,
And
yeah, of
that the
course.
community has developed, not even coming from the brand itself, but the people want to be connected together.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a few brands that do that really well. Another one that comes to mind is Harley Davidson, right? I mean, there's a
Yeah.
community for you. I mean, they all not only are they loyal to that brand. I mean, you wouldn't caught that on a Honda or a Ducati or
Right.
whatever else, any other motorcycle, but they do
Right.
that. I mean, they have communities, they have like online groups, they have events. I mean, they build huge communities and events around the Harley brand. So yeah, you want to belong to that, right? And you want to end if you're, and building community and back to merch for a second. Merch is the best way to help you do that because if you're in another country and you see somebody wearing a Harley shirt and you're a Harley fan, you're going to go up to them and you're going to like, so tell me about your Harley, right? It
That's
brings people
right.
together.
Yeah.
So it's a
It starts
huge way.
conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Building community for sure.
I love that. What's some of the most interesting? You talked earlier about like, we don't all just want like this, the pen or the clippy or the whatever thing, right? Like we all have those things. Everyone has that. What's some of the most unique things that are coming out in the swag industry right now for merch items?
Oh, well, your timing's great. Like I said, I just came back from Vegas. It's the PPAI, which stands for the Promotional Products um, International Association. I probably got that
Hmm.
wrong. Anyway, and I'm like PPAI, Promotional Products Advertising Association or something. Anyway, International Association, and where our suppliers from all over North America come, some from
Oh,
Europe,
nice.
and the big thing and the newest thing right now is sustainability. Right, people
Hmm.
are more savvy than other the younger generation, like the Gen Zs are the buyers, and they're the ones that are demanding it. They want
Hmm.
eco-friendly, they want inclusivity. Actually, it's funny, I just talked about this yesterday. I know this is going to be not till June, but
Yeah.
big thing is you talk about inclusivity. Well, inclusivity now is really important with clothing. Right. Because
Mm.
so many times when you work with clients, I just had a meeting with someone from a big company, and she said, our biggest challenge is trying to fit all our team members because we have the guys in the field that are like the 5X, 6X, and we have sometimes
Hmm.
younger people, but standard sizing is, small to double XL. And so more brands now in our industry are realizing that, and more unisex styles as well,
Mm.
and having more diverse sizing. So for example, she was telling me, we would give all our employees this beautiful shirt. I don't want to say the brand name, but this beautiful brand name shirt. But
Yeah.
then a couple of people were getting this sort of not as nice shirt because they couldn't have the bigger size. And
Mm,
so that is now changing. Right now, we're seeing more of the brands and bigger brands having more diverse sizing, and also the
nice.
not necessarily gender specific. So they're more unisex,
Yeah.
which is great because you have to, you talk about community inclusivity. Well, if
Hmm.
you're a big company and you have a bunch of employees out there, you don't want to exclude the ones that don't fit into that box that,
That's
you've
right.
designed it for. And so you want to
Yeah.
make sure that you partner with a supplier like me who can help you with all these things. So yeah, that's really big. And sustainability are the two things that were hot topics this time around, which I'm so
Yeah. Because I
excited about.
know, I mean, I have definitely donated about 5 dozen koozies over the years. I don't use them. I don't drink beer. I
Yeah,
don't drink soda pop. So like I totally useless swag item for me. And that's like already made of foam, right? Like you said, the younger generation is looking for more and more, like speaking of branding to this younger generation, not only are they looking for eco-friendly and sustainability and inclusivity, they're also looking for brands like Tom's and those others that give back,
100%. Yeah.
right? They want to know, how are you involved in your community? What are you doing
Yes.
other than making money, right?
Yeah. And that's actually a really great point because a lot more companies are doing that too. Like so many of them are. There's one I can think of in particular where every piece of clothing that you buy, they plant 10 trees, and there's a
Yes.
lot more that are doing things like that where they are giving back and building water wells in countries that are underdeveloped and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that the demand is there and that they're stepping up to, but I also have to say, and I've talked about this, is you also have to be mindful. There's a lot of virtual signaling and a lot of greenwashing going on out there. And so there's a lot of
Definitely.
companies out there that talk the talk, but aren't walking the walk. And so I'm
Mm,
really proud to say, if I may, that the company I work for, Genumark, we are actually B Corp certified, which I don't know if you know what that means, but it's
I
really
don't.
rigorous. You have to go through all these tests to become B Corp certified to make sure that your standards are according to what they look for as far as sustainability goes, equity, and
Mm,
um, all those things. And so we are one of the only company in our industry that is B Corp certified. So if you look
nice.
it up, you'll see. Yeah. So my point is, we don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk, and we
Yeah.
actually say what we're going to do, and we partner with companies that have the same values that we do that we can pass on to our clients. So yeah.
I love it. Well, that's
Yeah.
why you have success, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's what matters the very most.
Yeah.
What's the weirdest thing you've ever slapped a logo on for somebody?
Uh, oh, well, me personally, I don't know what the weirdest thing, but I've heard about some. I mean, there's nothing you can't slap a logo on, right?
Right.
You've
Yeah.
heard it all. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to go back into my vault and see. I mean, everything, condoms, they put logos on. I mean, I feel like that's so cliche, but I'm like, I'm trying to think. Me specifically, I can't think of an item off the top of my head that I've done that has a logo on it. But I have seen out there, and on in our company, some people have done some pretty wacky boxer shorts. I mean, those are kind of standards, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. What's the weirdest thing you've ever seen a logo on? Just curious.
Um, let's see. I got something I thought was interesting. My son received actually from I think a college recruitment thing. He's in high, we have a teenager too, last
Yeah.
one out of 5 on his way out. But
Wow.
he received a lanyard that has like a detachable clip, and it is like a little phone charger, like a little mini like phone USB.
USB. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean,
He also got one that disconnects and is a USB-C to USB-C charging cord, which I
yeah,
thought that's like multi-use. Like he's 16, so
yeah,
15, he loved it. So,
yeah,
that younger generation, I'm seeing some like more interesting.
yeah.
I saw a business card that had like a flash drive on it, for data storage, those sort of things.
You know what's funny?
Not really weird, but
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, it's so interesting. So I mean, you heard how long I've been in the industry, right? So I've seen it all, or I think,
yeah.
so for me, all that stuff is sort of like I see that all the time. And so but I
Yeah.
love you saying that because it gives me some perspective, as far as you not being as inundated as me as what you think is, cool and unique and different. Whereas like,
Oh
oh yeah,
yeah, and
those all.
yeah. So you have that. You
Yeah,
have to know.
yeah,
You've got the curse of knowledge
yeah,
because we at height we
yeah,
have a swag department. We also do promotional products for our clients, but I'm
Oh,
not
cool.
deeply involved in that.
Oh,
Like I just make the connection to my manager for that. But I network extensively. And so I receive so much swag. I'm a member of several chambers of commerce and the Better Business Bureau and all these things in my local community. So I'm just saying, like, we don't see all those wild requests and things that you get. We get pens, cups, chip clips. I mean, there's just 5 or 6 things that you typically get over and over and over again, that koozies, little cups, stuff like that just accumulate. And so like people are always looking for those wilder ideas of, I actually saw one that was like a cooling, one of those cooling neck things for like a golf tournament or something like that in the summer. Like, I just think most of us don't think about that stuff. We don't think outside the box.
And when I work with my clients, that's exactly it. You know, I let me come up with the ideas. But it's funny too, because everybody's different. And I try to, when I work with clients specifically, I'm very intentional as far as I don't try to get them to, invest in something that doesn't do anything. It has to be useful in some shape or form. It has to be, because we're trying to be sustainable and we're trying to be eco-friendly, but what's the point if something is recycled, but it's getting up the garbage, right? It still has to be useful and have, I think right now, the biggest thing for me that I am a huge proponent of, other than t-shirts, is bags, because I don't know about what it's like where you are, but no stores give out bags, right? When you go to get your groceries and Walmart, they don't give out bags anymore. Like, how many times I've walked out of the store forgetting my bag and I have nothing. So if you don't have I don't know if that's where you are, but it is where we are.
No, not at all. There are a few stores that are starting to charge for them, like 5 cents or something. And then like Aldi is a grocery store here that you can buy them, but most people bring their own. But as far as like the Walmart, Target, other stuff, like Target here gives you 5 cents off per bag you bring. But everyone here, we are in the South. Like,
you know what?
Nah, we just use the paper, the plastic, the straws, the whatever.
But you know what, Amy? Like, honestly, I mean, we're going to keep it real here. That's a whole other conversation, because
that's a whole other,
well, no, because I was just going to say to that, like, the day that I forgot my bags, and yes, you can buy them. You can buy like $3 a bag or whatever it is. But why I just spent, Canada right now, groceries are ridiculous. So I just spent $200 on groceries. I'm not going to now spend, $20 on bags. But it's ironic because I'm getting all this stuff that I can't put in a bag because I don't have it. But it's a plastic container and it's a plastic bag and it's another plastic container. And so everything is in plastic, but I can't. Anyway. So,
and it's this much packaging for an item this big, and you're like, what?
Yeah. And the eggs are in foam, and and this is in a plastic, and the milk is in a plastic container. And so, but that's diverting a little bit. But anyway, so
what's really exciting about that? I will tell you, there is a woman named Sharina here. I cannot remember her last name off the top of my head. She owns a company. She lives right here in Oklahoma City. She owns a company called Utopia Plastics. Completely plant-based plastics. She is getting partnerships with the NBA, with all kinds of huge corporations. And they actually finally made their first milk jug like last month. So it is incredible. It's totally sustainable, completely plant-based, easier to make. Like they're giving away not giving away, but they're like licensing the technology so it can be used all over. It's so incredible. So there's good things on the horizon with that. I'm really excited. Coming right out of Oklahoma. Who would have known it? I'm so proud of our state.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think it's great. I just think there's lots of contradictions happening, right? So
100%.
So
but
anyway,
one little step at a time, I guess is all we can do.
Yeah. So bags, especially if you're listening to this and you're living in an area where they don't have bags at the grocery store, they're charging you. It's such a low cost item that you will get so much use of, and talk about a great way to create brand awareness for your business. And, don't just put a logo on it, put on something really cool someone's going to come up to you and say, hey, what does that mean? And now you've created conversation. So that's a really easy no brainer, but sometimes those are the best,
Yeah. I love your idea of putting kind of some other, not even necessarily your tagline or your slogan or something, but something on your item that creates a community around your brand. Yeah. I just love that. I can't get that off my mind.
Yeah. Well,
there's so many ideas. No.
No, I go around talking about it when I do a presentation, and I'm trying to, I've been in this industry a long time, and I'm just trying to educate people in the industry. Like, it's not just slapping a logo on something. Think about what it is you're trying to accomplish. People are spending hard-earned money, so let them get the most out of it. And what's a great way to do that? So
Yeah. I love
anyway,
that. So you've chosen badass as your word. What
yeah.
do you have any ideas of a past, like maybe like a home services client, like a plumber, electrician, like what's something that a home services guy, could put on their swag items that would help to create a community? Any
Well,
ideas?
Well, lots, but I think again, that's where I would sit down and I do this, where I would have to know more about them. I'd have to know more about who they are, what their brand is, what's their mission, what's their purpose, like what do they stand for, right? And
Yeah.
and I do that when I sit with my clients. Like, it's simple, but it's not easy. It's not just a matter
Right.
of like, okay, you should be this. It's a matter of like, okay, let's talk. I want to learn more about you. Like I said, mine tells my story. If you sit,
Hmm.
when people say what's badass, I'm like, well, do you really want to know? Because I'll tell you, right? And then,
Right.
so I'm sorry, that may not be the answer you
No, it's
want,
all right.
but I just think it's really, it's more about getting to know who they are, and then try to hone in on what is unique and differentiates them about what they're doing and what's the problem they're solving, and then come up with something that really personifies that's going to be creative and get attention. I mean, a
Yeah.
great big example again is Nike, right? I mean, Nike doesn't put, yes, they have like the swoosh on everything, but chances are most of the stuff has just do it, right? When you see a t-shirt, it says just do it and then the swoosh. There's not a lot of things that actually have the Nike on it, if I can
Yeah.
off the top of my
Right.
head, because just do it is such an inspirational or aspirational statement, right? It's saying go
Yes.
do whatever it is that you've been wanting to do, and you can get out there. And then, by the way, when you do it, use our product, because then you'll do it better, right? So
That's
that's
right.
an example of taking something and being aspirational to the person that you give it to, so they wear it with pride.
Hmm.
So that's just something out of my head. I mean, I don't know who this electrician or plumber is, but that's an example of a brand that does it really well, where they inspire you, and it's not by sticking their Nike logo on everything. It's by telling you to go out there and just do it.
That's right. Yeah. Maybe a plumber can inspire someone to say, plunging sucks. Call us instead.
Yeah,
Nobody
yeah.
wants to plunge.
Yeah. Or,
That's right.
yeah, I mean, you could have fun with it. Like, what do people hate about? I mean, I know nothing about plumbing, right? So it saves you time. It doesn't save you money, but it saves you time.
Yeah.
But that's a good point though, because, and I talk about building brand equity for your business, because you want to take money out of the equation, right? I mean, when you want a good plumber, because you have serious plumbing in your house, and depending, like, you want a good plumber. You want to
Yeah.
call, Dave, because your friends recommend Dave and he's amazing and his service is good, and you're not going to have any issues. You're not going to go, who's the cheapest plumber out there that can do it, knowing that it might leak, right? And so that's a really, again, bringing the point home about when you have a really strong brand and you become a category leader in your space, it's not necessarily going to be the cheapest. It's going to be the
Right.
best and different. And so I think that's something that a lot of people need to think about, because I had a guest on, and he's amazing. And he said, the four most dangerous words in business is all things being equal. Because all things being equal, what are people going to make their decision on? Do you know?
What?
Price. And you
Ah,
don't want that, right? All things being
yeah.
equal, like if you have two plumbers and they're exactly the same, they do the same service, they give the
That's right.
same, they both get 5 stars, everything's exactly the same. Who are you going to go with? Well, you're going to go with the less expensive.
Cheaper.
But if
Yeah.
you have Bob, who, like, you call him, he calls you right back. He says, I'll be there in 10 minutes, versus the other guy who you have to call 3 times and who doesn't show up for another week, or says, I'll be there
Hmm.
between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. and who, leaves and then there's a mess or there's leaks. You're going to
That's
go with
right.
Bob, even though maybe he's a little bit more expensive because of
That's
all
right.
that. So anyway,
Yeah.
so that's really important, right? To differentiate yourself.
100%. Yeah. People are looking for service. They're looking for connection. They're looking for a brand that they can align with, right?
Yeah. And trust. It's so
100%. And
important
trust.
to build trust, because you know that every single time Bob shows up, he's going to give you the same amazing service, and you're going to leave being happy. And all the best brands out there know that, and they build that trust. And it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. To build that trust and to build a strong brand, it takes years.
Yeah.
And but if it's done right, it's going to pay off huge, So
100%.
yeah.
100%. Well, Jolie, this has been a fascinating, fabulous and fascinating
You
at
can
the
tell
same
I'm so
time
passionate about it,
conversation.
eh?
I love it. Yeah, for sure.
And you
She
too.
said A. Finally, I got the A. I love it. Is there
Yeah.
anything else that you want to make sure that the guests hear about branding before we go?
Yes. So I talked about differentiating yourself. And when I bring on, so I have had, I think, 109 episodes, so 109 guests on my show. And I ask them all different questions, very personal to them and what they do. But I ask one question to all my guests, and that is, what is your badass superpower? And out of 109 guests, and I think it's 109, I've never got the same answer twice. And I think
Wow.
that is really important, because that shows you about branding is about differentiating yourself. And so I tell people when I do my presentations, I say, tap into your badass superpower. What is it? I have this presentation, I'm giving it away now, but I have on the back of me, I have all the superheroes, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, you name it. And I say, neither one of them is better than the other, but they all have a superpower that makes them unique, and they all have a niche that they serve. And when someone needs, someone to leap tall buildings, Man of Steel, they go to Superman. If they need someone, they go to Batman. So what is your badass superpower that is going to help you stand out, differentiate yourself from everybody else? So when people need that particular superpower, they're going to come to you. And I think if you can focus in on that, and it's not easy, but I think that's going to help you build your brand.
That's so great. What is yours?
Yeah. Well, I would say, based on what I know, I would say helping businesses build their brands, helping people tap into their badass superpower, whether it's through my merch business or through my podcast. I also do some consulting in my speaking now too. I'm getting a lot of great feedback. So I'm very passionate about it. And as you can probably tell, so I think that's probably it.
I love it. That's awesome. Well, thank you, Jolie, for being my guest. And thank you for being a queen that leads. Where can people find you if they want to connect?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you, because I love your podcast. I listen to it. I think you're great. I love your energy, and I love what you're doing to inspire other women and help other women, and by sharing your story and being so transparent. So congratulations to you. And thank you so much for having me on. I really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So I would say you can reach me. I'm the only branding badass. So if you just Google branding badass, you'll find me. But if you want to check out my podcast, it's Branding Matters. And my website is brandingmatters.ca if you want one of these badass t-shirts. But I am pretty low, so you'll have to check the stock. I'm waiting for new stock to come in. And then if you're looking for someone to help you build awareness with badass merch, it's Genumark. And you can reach me at jgoodson@genumark.com. And the website's genumark.com. So
I love it. Thank you so much again, Jolie, for being my guest. And thanks for being a queen that leads.
Thank you.
The Queen's Lead podcast is recorded worldwide and produced by the kick-ass media team at the Height Digital home base in Nicaragua. Until our next episode, stay real, queens, and go lead. Remember to tap that follow and leave your review. For freebies and more real, inspiring content you love, go to amysingleton.net. and connect with Amy on our socials at The Real Amy Singleton.
One more thing. This is the legal language, what my lawyer wrote and what I need to read to you. This podcast is presented for educational and entertainment purposes only. I am Amy Singleton, and I'm just your friend. Although I may speak to many on this show, I am not a psychotherapist, a business coach, a doctor, a CPA, a lawyer, or probably anyone who should be giving you professional advice. This podcast is not a substitute for a relationship with your doctor, coach, or any other licensed professional. Got it? Good. Now go be a queen and follow me at The Real Amy Singleton.